Hi everyone, my name is Brianna Cosco. I did my software project this week on student response systems or clickers. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what those are and what they look like in the classroom and some different ways that you can use them. So first off, what is a student response system? So a student response system is both a hardware and a software. So I thought it would be kind of a good bridge between last week and this week's content. It can be used in the classroom to quickly collect answers to questions from all students in the room. If an educator chooses, the response system collects and graphically displays a summary of the data. Student response systems help to facilitate different teaching and learning activities in which teachers can collect student data instantly in a comfortable way where students feel safe to participate. So, I'm going to talk a little more about how this benefits our students and our teachers. So, we'll continue to talk about that. Here's just a simple picture to kind of give you an idea of what one of the systems looks like. So this is from Elmo, but this just shows you the class set of the clickers that you would pass out to your students. And you see there that there's buttons on them that correspond to answers they'd see on the screen. So you could either label them as 1, 2, 3 or ABC, different things like that, but very simple for younger kids or older kids to learn how to use. So, what's the need for a student response system? So, in education today, we know that data is really at the forefront of all the decisions that teachers are making regarding their instruction. So, we want to know how we can quickly get that, right? To get that feedback and get that information we need to adjust our instruction. But we also know there's been a push to assess students in a variety of ways. So this means that quizzes and tests aren't always the best way to assess our students, and they're not the only way to assess our students. So a student response system gives us a different way to differentiate our instruction and our method of collecting assessment. So this is a great way to differentiate your assessment and to collect your data. Teachers are constantly trying to assess whether their students are comprehending what's being taught, right? That's the number one goal. Are they understanding what we're teaching? So, student response systems are a really effective way for teachers to pose a question and get students' responses in real time. So, right there, right then, in that moment. So, this quick feedback allows teachers to adjust their instruction immediately without having to wait until the end of a unit to get to a test or a quiz, right? So, sometimes by the end of the unit, it's almost too late to go back. But if you're collecting all that data immediately during a lesson, you can understand and grasp whether your students are grasping what you're talking about and you need to go back and reteach, or you can continue on and kind of develop their skills further. Just talking about the differentiation portion of that. So, this really speaks to the product part of it. So, our students all demonstrate their learning in different ways. So, we want their learning to be addressed and assessed in the best way possible for them. So we know that all students learn differently and all students perform and display their knowledge differently. So we want authentic activities and assessment. We want various opportunities and choices to allow them to show what they know. So this is just one other way that we can differentiate that step number 3, that product of how they're demonstrating their learning. How do student response systems work? So, like I said before, it is a software and a hardware system in which students submit answers to questions via a transmitter or a clicker, we say. And I'll talk about another type of system that you can use as well because it's not always a clicker. But the transmitter sends the answer through a radio frequency, which is captured by a computer through a USB receiver. And just to show you, that USB receiver was in the middle down at the bottom. So, that comes with the system as well if you're using a clicker system. So the teacher poses a question to their students by projecting that question up on the board or writing it down on their whiteboard, and then they can answer. The answer choices are up there for the whole class to see. So each student will select their answer using their handheld device or clicker. The clickers are typically assigned by number, so that's how you know what number corresponds to which student. The software on the teacher's computer collects the student responses and creates a chart to organize the responses for the teacher to see. The teacher can make quick decisions based on the data received to help guide their instruction. Do the students understand, or is further instruction needed? So that's kind of just the cycle of how those clickers or that student response system works in your classroom. Now, how do we integrate the student response system into the classroom? While some may see a student response system as kind of a limited capability and its ability to ask varying types of questions, it actually can serve multiple purposes and it's pretty easily integrated in the classroom. So all the teacher really needs to do is assign those clickers to the student and then give them that basic lesson on how to use those clickers, and they pick it up pretty quickly. So the next thing we want to talk about is the types of questions you could ask. So, again, it does seem kind of basic because really it's multiple choice or true false that really work best with this type of response system. But these are the different types of questions that I've seen be successful. So, you can have recall questions. So, just a simple recall of a fact or a concept that was covered in class. That's really just that multiple choice or that true false. So, it doesn't go super deep into the concept. We can next do conceptual understanding questions. So these go beyond the recall and they kind of assess students' understanding of important concepts. So, can they classify something? Can they match something? Can they translate? That's kind of a next step up, a little bit higher order question. Then, can they apply that? So, you can ask some application questions. Um, these types of questions ask students to apply knowledge and understanding by making a decision based off a given scenario. So if you give a scenario, they can kind of use what they know to decide how to apply that and answer your question. Next is a critical thinking question. So you can have students sharing opinions and experiences using the response system. And those questions oftentimes lead to some rich discussions in class. So again, those student response systems can collect basic answers, but those different questions and answers that you're gathering can kind of lead to different discussions in class. And then other types of questions that you can utilize the student response system for is the some perspective questions. You can assess their confidence levels, so you can ask them to rate themselves maybe as a 1, 2, or 3, like how do you feel after this lesson? 1, I'm not sure, I really need more help. 3, I really understand, I could probably teach this to my neighbor. Monitoring questions similar to that, or classroom experiments, you can use those to make predictions and things like that. Next, just two different types of clickers, or sorry, student response systems that I've seen in use in the classroom. One was the clicker, so they had the buttons on there individually with the 1, 2, 3 or the ABC, so they can assign a certain answer to a button on their response clicker. So students grab their assigned clicker. As the lesson goes on, teachers display those questions with the options listed below them. The students read the question and possible answers and then click the answer that they want using their clicker. And the data is instantly collected on the teacher's computer. So that data is saved and that can be turned into graphs later for the teacher to look at. Kahoot is another one I've seen. So, this is an online student response system that allows students to use their classroom Chromebook or iPads. So, we've used these in kindergartens here in my school. And the students use their iPad and they sign in, they write their name in so the teacher knows whose response is coming from who. Question is similarly displayed on the board for the class to see, as well as this one uses symbols instead of numbers or letters. So, there are symbols and colors. So, the student will figure out which answer they'd like to select, and then they figure out either it's the red with the triangle that they pick for their answer or the blue diamond, and that's the button they'll hit on their device. So again, teacher knows who it is because students have to sign in, but the responses pop up on the board afterwards and they simply tell you the number of students that picked each response. So it's still anonymous to the class. Ways to use a student response system in your classroom. So, first type of way you can use it is for formative assessment. The student response system helps teachers assess student learning and understanding in a range of ways. Teachers can ask simple multiple choice questions based off of key concepts and use this to see what percentage of students understand it. Some systems, such as Top Hat, they do allow for students to give short answers. I have never seen this in practice, but I know that that possibility is out there with some of the systems. Quizzes, teachers can use those for quizzes. They can build the quizzes. Students can take them during class, and this is just a kind of different take. Instead of doing a paper pencil test, you can put the questions up for students to collect and answer on their clickers or their device that they're using. So just kind of a different way to collect that assessment data. And it does grade it for you. I mean, you'll go back and you'll see these students answered this question correctly or incorrectly. So it does allow you to use that for grading as well. You can use it for assessing prior knowledge. So at the beginning of a unit or a lesson, maybe you want to know how many students connect to or have previously heard some academic vocabulary that relates to what you're going to be teaching. So it could be a simple, have you heard this term, yes or no? Or you can ask them whether they know more things than that. So you can go more higher level than that and ask them to answer some different questions so they get harder and harder as they go, and see how many students can make it through more than just those simple beginning level questions, because maybe they know more things than you'd think, and you don't have to teach as much of that as you maybe thought you would have to. So again, assessing prior knowledge, it kind of helps you to gauge where students are at before you even start a unit. And then finally, this is not typically used for taking attendance, but you could use it for taking attendance. And I know that my school in particular has put a big push on social emotional connections between our students and our teachers. So it's a great way to kind of gauge where they're at. You could ask like an emotions question. So you could put 4 options up there, like maybe how are you feeling this morning? Happy, sad, mad, or some other type of option. So kind of just to connect in that way, and then you can use it to see which students are there that day. So just another simple way that you can use that student response system. But as you can see, there's a range of ways, and there are even more out there that I'm sure that we could all come up with and be creative in finding. Finally, why should we use a student response system? So, student response systems are really great for increasing active and cooperative learning. So, we know that students oftentimes they have a short attention span, and so if you're kind of just up there talking, maybe they were listening, but they kind of tend to glaze off and they're not really paying attention anymore. If students know these types of questions are coming or they get to actively participate, they're a little more motivated to stay engaged in what you're talking about. So, the first way that these are great in the classroom is they maintain that student attention. So if students are waiting to be able to participate, they're going to be a little more active in trying to maintain that attention to what you're talking about. The second way, they promote active engagement. So all students can be engaged in this. Every student gets a clicker. The teacher can see if students are participating and which students are participating or are not participating. So this alone would help to motivate your students who maybe aren't usually engaged to answer those questions that you're asking. It promotes discussion and collaboration. So maybe after all the students have answered the questions, maybe you anonymously display how many students answered correctly or incorrectly. And then you can use this to kind of fuel a discussion or some collaboration. That's a great way to promote that in your classroom. It encourages participation, like we said. Every student can feel safe to participate, and every student can answer that question without fear of having their neighbors knowing what their answer was or feeling embarrassed about answering incorrectly. Next, that kind of leads to that is creating that safe space for shy or unsure students. I was one of those students. I never wanted to raise my hand for fear that I was wrong or people would laugh at me if I didn't get the answer right. So, this gives you a way, if you are one of those shy or unsure students, to answer that question without feeling that sense of embarrassment. You can feel kind of safe and secure in the fact that you know that you've answered the question, but nobody else around you will know if you were correct or incorrect. Next, quick way to check student understanding during learning. So we don't want to be waiting for the end of those units to see if our students have learned. We want to know day by day, are students getting this or do we need to keep reteaching? The next way, it helps teachers to quickly adapt their instruction. Again, so important. If our kids aren't getting things, we need to be able to find that out quickly so that we can adjust our instruction and go from there. And then finally, it allows students to answer questions without comparing themselves or their level of understanding to that of their peers. So we know that all students learn so differently, and we know that kids compare themselves to their peers, and we don't want that. So we want all students to feel safe answering questions, and we want to know from our students if they're not understanding things. So if they're truly not understanding, this is going to give them a safe way to share that with you. And here's just a little video about how these look in the
According
classroom.
to independent research, using student response systems in the classroom can improve student achievement and test scores by 15 to 30% or more. Why are Turning Technologies solutions so effective? Today's students, known as digital natives, have an average attention span of just 7 minutes. They have had various forms of technology, like video games, email, and text messaging, competing for their attention during most of their lives. These students need to be actively involved in the learning process, and a student response system is the perfect tool to create this engaging classroom environment. With a student response system from Turning Technologies, you can easily ask questions and collect responses from all students in real time. The results are immediately available for review and automatically stored so you can view additional reports after class. These proven tools allow educators to implement effective pedagogical techniques that really improve student performance by transforming the classroom experience. Students are able to participate in class anonymously among their peers, but can be uniquely identified to monitor progress, perform assessments, and track participation. As students participate, they gain immediate feedback, and instructors can assess comprehension instantly to facilitate better understanding and learning. During class, instructors can quickly and accurately analyze student comprehension and differentiate instruction to meet the needs of all students, while involving each student in their own personal learning and assessment process. Turning Technologies has software options for use with any material without preparation, even web based, or inside PowerPoint to gather student responses during new or existing presentations without learning complicated new technologies. Plus, you can upload your classroom results to a learning management system like Moodle or Blackboard to track and analyze the student response data and assessment results. Students respond using compact, reliable, and easy to use response card hardware, or they can respond using the web based ResponseWare platform on smartphones, laptops, or any other device with a web browser. Plus, it's easy and cost effective to connect remote classrooms to a central presentation for distance learning and remote polling applications. To improve student achievement in their classroom, more organizations worldwide have chosen to partner with Turning Technologies than any other student response solution provider. More than 4 million response cards are used by organizations in over 90 countries, and over half of the colleges and universities in the United States use Turning Technologies products. Contact Turning Technologies today to learn why.
So again, that's just one example of a system that can be used, but that's not all of them. And it has similar benefits to any other type of student response system that you're going to see. So I hope that you found this helpful and that eventually maybe you'll have the opportunity to use a student response system in your classroom and see how it works for you. Here are some references I used for the data that I pulled up to go through today. So if you'd like to look into any more of these are great resources to look into. So thank you, and I hope this helps.